Hi, I'm Dr. David Greenfield of Global Comics and Learning. Um, Today I'm going to talk a little about um, the curriculum and the process of what I teach and what the students learn. Um, it's quite interesting. Um, I think it's quite interesting. Of course, I'm a fan of this. So let me start out by saying there are four basic um, meetings to get the program and the students up and running. Um, these can be offered in any way. Sorry, I have a scratchy nose here. These can be offered sequentially for a month, uh, for in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, or I can stretch out the whole program to 10 months, except um, the first four will be done in 2 to 3 months, and everything after that will be an extension for deeper dives into comics as a whole, and the work of the students in particular. Um, Although I will be able to include guest speakers of comic artists and um, different kinds of scholars and activists in the comic world. So let me start out with what happens on the first week. Actually, take a step back. There are actually 5 sessions to begin with. The first session is only for the teachers, and that's where we talk about the technology, what the teachers have and what they have access to. One of the problems or challenges that I've discovered in working in global e-learning for the past 7 or 8 years is that oftentimes um, students and classes, or more specifically classrooms, in non-Western countries and even in some Western countries are not well designed acoustically. They're basically acoustically unfriendly. The reason for this is that many schools are made out of concrete or cinder blocks, and they don't have any kind of acoustic buffering on the walls. Things such as uh, blankets, egg cartons, or books. A library is a great space for doing globally learning because books are a natural muffler, you could say, that they pick up the echoes and they pick up the bouncing of the sound waves. Also, there's some sometimes issues with the microphone of teachers are only using the computer for a whole classroom. So I help the teachers address what they've got and what they need and how they can get what they need. For example, I work with teachers to help them identify locations and institutions in their general vicinity where they might have like a school, a department of media, television, movies, radio, anything that uses sound. And those students can be engaged either as a intern or as a volunteer project to help the teachers prepare a room for globally learning, for what I do and for what other teachers and classes do in the world, such as not just the walls, making the walls acoustically friendly, but how to set up a classroom. Sometimes students are set far back, and those in the back don't hear properly. They can't, when they speak, we can't hear them because the mic is too far away. So we talk about strategies to make the classes as friendly and usable as possible. Um, and that's a big part of any kind of global education, is that the students really do have to be able to hear and they have to be able to speak. And so that's what always the first session is about, that. Unless, of course, I'm working with a school that already has a good setup, a proper setup. Some schools do, but a lot of schools don't. Recently taught a class to a school in Bangladesh where the students there met outside and they used a laptop and they were spread out a little bit. So we couldn't always hear each other. So I want to be able to get the teachers thinking about it. There's a lot of people that do global learning where they just go right in and start talking to the students, and that doesn't always work. So to help and support a successful class, we have to start out with making sure that everybody can see and hear. Writing on a board is not necessary. If they need to draw, they can do it on paper and a pencil or a pen, that old technology, and then they could bring it in online afterwards. So that's the first part. The second class, the one that really starts the program, is an overview of the history of sequential graphic narrative, i.e. comics, graphic novels, or any other kind of pictorial unit where the story is presented both pictorially with text. And I start out with the Chauvet Cave, or Chauvet Cave, which is in southern France. It's a really interesting and incredibly spiritual place. The cave was found in southern France in about 1994. And the French government at the time realized that they wanted and needed to protect it, which they had done to the caves at Lascaux. The caves at Lascaux, the paintings in the cave have slowly deteriorated over the years since it was founded because of all the visitors and all the breathing, and the air changes the moisture. It releases microbes that affect the pigment on the walls. So it's kind of sad. In Chauvet, they prevented that. As soon as the discoverers found it and related the information to the French government, the government put a huge vault door, like you'd find in a bank, that closed off the cave. So it prevented wanderers from just going in and going out. The government and the Department of Sciences and History wanted to protect it as much as possible. The next thing they did, they put a metal walkway raised about so much over the floor in order to protect the floor from people wandering around. Why would they want to protect it? Because throughout the cave, there are pieces of bones, there are footprints, and there are other, you could say, items that are associated with the cave. Remember, or if I haven't mentioned it, the cave is between 28 and 38,000 years old. For most of that time, until 1994, it was pretty much hidden from view. So it was protected naturally. But when people started finding out about it, the government wanted to protect it. The vault door is only open, it's opened infrequently to protect it. The movie Cave of Forgotten Dreams by Werner Herzog was made with assistance and the support of the French government. Herzog and 3 assistants were allowed to go in the cave and film with very special lights that would not destroy or alter the pigments. And they had to do all the filming standing on this narrow walkway throughout the cave. They were allowed in at the beginning of the day, and they were allowed out. That's the only time these kind of photographs, and probably the one and only time that a movie would be made of the cave. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest it. It is really inspiring and really wonderful to see the creativity of human beings that's going back 28,000 years. I mean, think about it. 28,000 years ago, there was probably not a verbal language. There was definitely not a text language, but there were pictures. And the people that lived in that area drew pictures on the walls of what they saw. but they weren't static pictures. Many of the pictures were of the animals that lived with them running across fields. But to make it even more interesting, in our time, we could look at them and say, well, there's a narrative going on. There's one wall in particular that always stuck to me, which is on the one side, you have a whole herd of saber-toothed tigers running from one side, say right to the left. Then there's kind of an indentation in the wall. And on the other side of the wall, there's a herd of mastodons and deer and other kinds of animals that are running away from the saber-toothed tigers. The thing is that these two walls were painted 10,000 years apart. So they weren't painted together, but they were still telling the story, a sequential story of saber-toothed tigers chasing after a herd of dinner. It's amazing. It's truly an amazing film. That's what I start out and how I start out the history of, I won't say graphic novels, but a sequential graphic narrative, telling a story only with pictures. Following that, I go into other cave and rock paintings throughout the world, in North and South America, in Africa, and Asia. They're all over the place through different periods. And when you start looking at them, you start seeing the development of a pictorial language that eventually led to the verbal language and a combined language. We can see that when we look at the hieroglyphics in Egypt, where you see all these pictures, and each pictograph represents an object, a person, or an action. And when you put them together, you suddenly get a narrative, you get a story. Of course, that's in conjunction with an existing verbal language. Well, that pictorial language eventually led to the development of the Western alphabet. Pictures of the first letter or the second letter in Hebrew, which is also in Greek, bait means house. And if you look at it, it looks like it's got two verticals with a horizontal across the top, like a little house. So when you understand, and then it goes on. What do I mean it goes on? Artisans and historians of that time that these were being developed met with people from other countries, and they created large steels or stones that had hieroglyphs and other written languages at the time, maybe Greek, maybe whatever. We know this through the Rosetta Stone, which is on display in England, and several other stones that have been found since. So it allows people of different languages to start understanding each other. And so it starts with a sequential graphic narrative. Those led, of course, to printing with pen and ink on papyrus and other materials, which eventually led to printing press, block printing, which eventually led to text being printed on the movable text printer of Gutenberg. And that led to the Bible, which led to novels, which eventually led to novels with pictures, which eventually led to comics and graphic novels. It only took 38,000 years to do so, but it helps the students understand where they are located in the grander scheme of storytelling. Storytelling is what we learn across the board around the world about where we are, where we came from, and what we're going to do. Whether that be designing a new automobile or trying to find out how wagons were made 300 years ago. It's all a matter of forming these together. So throughout this initial talk, I do speak slowly. I allow lots of questions, and I bring up some examples of then and now and in between. I don't go into it deeply, just to expose the students to see the line that goes back from way back then to what they're doing now. And that's pretty much the first lesson. The second lesson, which could happen within a week, within a month, I start talking about genres in comics, what existed and what exists, as well as the formal elements. So when I talk about genre, a comic is not just superheroes. My specialty, and what I wrote my doctoral dissertation on, was using graphic novels to tell stories pertaining to social justice. So that means biographies and memoirs of famous people. That means historical and historical fiction about events that took place. It means just information. And for examples of each, in my collection, I have books about John Lewis and Muhammad Ali. I have Hedy Lamarr, who without her, we probably would not be at where we are with wireless communications. Amazing woman. Look up the graphic novel about her. You can learn a lot. I have books about wars. I have books about forced migrations, and I have books about philosophy. I have introduction to Nietzsche and to Buddhism, and there's several others in the series. I have a series about classic Japanese cuisine that's told as a story about a competition between a father and a son who are going at it heart to heart to figure out and identify who makes the best traditional Japanese meal. Well, this isn't just recipes, and it isn't just about these guys fighting, but you go into the details of the different kinds of menus and what they represent and where they get and how the tastes are. It's fascinating, but you learn about other cultures. There's a genre called graphic journalism, in which really the man who developed it is named Joe Sacco. And he's written these amazing books that could be photojournals, but they're all drawn. They're all graphic, comic format. Books about what's taken place or what took place in Yugoslavia, what has taken place and is taking place in Israel and Palestine and Gaza and the West Bank, and a lot of other stories. He has a book about what's happening in some of the areas of they need lots of support here in the United States, areas of poverty, areas of bad pollution. And there's comic as well as there's text describing what they saw and what they did, they meaning Sacco and his partner. So it's really interesting. There's another genre called graphic medicine. They're based in England, but they don't produce comics, but they distribute them, write about them, support them. And this is all about different kinds of health issues around the world. There are issues dealing with mental health. There are issues dealing with physical health. There are issues about disease, nonfiction, and you might say historical fiction. Fabulous things that could be introduced to any curriculum based on the age, of course, but they're very, very well written, very well researched, and I highly suggest that. So I introduced to the students to these kinds of genre. The reason I look at these genre, because the basic work that the students are doing is not about superheroes and talking animals, but it's about themselves. They write about, you might say, autobiographical shorts. One project I'm working and developing now is about celebrations in different countries around the world. Every celebration has a special kind of meal that goes with it, or even celebrations like weddings around the world. Each country and each culture has its own special menu, specialty foods. So as I work with students around the world, I get them to talk about where they're from and what they eat. The reason being, in a story, the best place for a story like that to take place is in a kitchen. And everybody knows you learn most about a different family and a different culture by hanging out in the kitchen. For example, I grew up in East Los Angeles. I'm Jewish of East European descent. Our neighbors were Mexican American, and we were family. And whenever we had a celebration, they'd come to us. Whenever they had a celebration, we'd hang out there. And I was always in the kitchen, either my mother's or our tias, our aunties, where they, we'd watch them prepare. We'd ask questions. We'd smell, oh my God, the food smelled so good. And then we got to eat it. And we got to learn about why one culture would use cumin and another culture would not. And if we think about the different foods around the world and the different cultures, there are some similarities. You'll find garlic all over the place. There are countries that don't have garlic. Why? Well, you learn about what's available to a particular culture in their native community. They eat what's around them. Some people eat more vegetables. Some people eat more meat. If you think about the shepherds out in Mongolia, they're going to eat a lot more meat than places that have a lot more vegetables and fruits. So you learn about these things while you're creating a comic about your family, where they're from, what they ate, what their traditions were for celebrations. Weddings are different all over the world. Wedding is a great way because everybody loves a wedding, and everybody has a way of celebrating it. In my culture, in my community, we have bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvah. Boys and girls, when we turn 13, we don't have it in other cultures. So a wedding is a good way to get people to come together and celebrate and learn about each other. Within this particular unit, I also talk about the formal elements of a graphic novel, of a comic, of what makes it. I talk about the panels, how many panels or the lack of panels. I talk about how to use text. I have a great comic, a great graphic novel called, it's the prize, it could be the gift. I can't remember now. It's been a while since I read it, but I have it in my collection. But there's absolutely no text in it. You have to look at it and look at the images and see what they're telling. And parts of it get kind of dreamlike, parts of it are very real, but it's completely engaging. It's in some ways like watching the old silent movies where everything had to be done through pantomime. Here it's pantomime of the book. I address issues of how time is represented, how space is represented, how motion is represented. There are a lot of different ways. And as I explain this to the students, I also give examples of books with text, books without text, books with text from other countries. I have books in Hebrew, I have books in Thai, and I have books buried away that I don't even know what they are. I've been collecting for a long time, but it's a good way to show students that what they're doing is not only in their particular country and their particular language, but there's certain similarities that exist in storytelling throughout the world. And this binds them with other people in other countries and also allows them to start thinking in terms of the story that we tell. So when do I tell them about how to tell a story? That would be in the third session. And in that, I really talk about the formal elements of storytelling and narrative. Every good story around the world has three basic elements. You have the introduction, where you introduce the main characters briefly. You set up the plot, what's going to take place, what they're trying to do. If you're in a kitchen trying to cook, if you're in a Jewish American kitchen, you introduce the mother, the father, the grandmother, the aunts, the uncles. Actually, that would be in everybody's kitchen. And then you get to the story, which is like you start, talking about it, producing it, giving a recipe, sending people out to find things that you forgot. You find a way to engage the students, bring them in, and also teach them. And the students are creating these. So the students have to go to their families and ask, what do we eat when we have a celebration? What is the celebration about? What does the food represent? And that way they not only learn about it, they learn how to make it, and they continue their tradition. But there's even something better. They get to exchange and share their stories with students in other schools in other countries. So these other students learn about somebody else. Totally non-challenging, non-violent. No, I'm better than you. It's this is what we eat. That's what you eat. Isn't that cool? Wouldn't it be great if we had a meal, if we got together someday for a meal and we were all able to celebrate with each other? You know, the people from Sarmenia would talk about baklava. The people from Mexico would talk about dulce de leche, leche del dulce. We'll say, oh, I can't remember it, but it's sweet milk. It's so delicious. You know, everybody has a different kind of dessert. You learn about these, and you learn that it's okay to learn and to like them. So I also give examples of that, and then I help the students begin to prepare for their own stories. Okay, you want to make a story about your cousin's wedding. Okay, who was invited to the wedding? Who prepared the food? What kind of food was prepared? Once the food was prepared, how was it presented? How did everybody like it? And what happened afterwards? It's a great story, but it does take a lot of work. But anybody can do it, just about any age. I have a graphic novel that was written by a 12-year-old Vietnamese immigrant to America, was studying in the Pacific Northwest. Christopher Ha was his name, and he wrote a book about the Holocaust. He was studying about the Holocaust, and he was so taken by it that he wrote a graphic novel about it. It took him a year to do, and the drawing looks like it was written by a 10 to 12-year-old, but he did it all. He wrote it, he illustrated it, he did the sound, and it's a fabulous book. But I use that to show the students that no matter what age, you can create a story that will make you feel good, that will make others feel good, that will teach others, and that you can share with other people. And finally, the last session that we meet, at least for the short 4 to 5 week sessions, would be writing and art assistance, where students have taken their basic story and have written out a storyboard. They've written out a script. They've written out a storyboard, and they're starting to illustrate and put things together. And I will help them as a whole and as one-on-one with questions about the story, about the characters, about the pictures, about what makes it whole. Of course, I should also say throughout all of these lessons, I'm always available for questions. I'm always available to talk to them. And I'm always available, for the most part, to speak with students in between classes. The teachers call me up or send me an email saying, I have some students that need a little help, and I will find a way to meet with them, all on Zoom. Everything is done on Zoom now. I would love to meet with them in person, but it's a little hard for me to get to Lagos, Nigeria, or Bangladesh or Vietnam right now. Maybe in the future, but that's where we are right now. I know that the feedback I've gotten from the teachers and the students has been very, very positive. They're very excited about all of this, which makes me very happy, and I'm still continuing to do it. Currently, I'm doing all of this pro bono. I want the students to learn, and this isn't just about learning about comics. As you probably figured out by now, I bring in a lot of different topics that are not comics related, but are related to learning, related to culture and community, and share stories, my experiences. By the way, I'm an artist. I've been an artist for 40 years, painting, photography, and a little printmaking. I have not done a comic yet, although I've drawn a lot of pictures, but I'm currently in process on two books. So, you know, I can't teach it if I haven't done it, although I can, in this case, teach it for the way I'm teaching and what I'm teaching. My degrees, my graduate degrees are in educational technology and learning technologies. And when I say learning technology for me, I look at it very broadly. Educational technology is really about using digital technology in education. Learning technology is using any kind of technology, including a pencil and paper. There are people that say, we should be totally focused on the digital because that's what's going on. Well, I think it's really important, but I think it's also important to learn the roots. I mean, of the media, painting and art is still about a drawing tool, a painting tool, and getting a feel for it. Dancing can't be done by AI. I mean, you can see it on an AI generated movie, but you're not seeing and not really feeling what's either you dancing or watching real dancing happening. So I want the students to learn. It's like learning to read. This is another component of learning to read. There's another reason why I like comics, besides the fact I learned how to read on comics, because they're completely portable. You can take them everywhere, even when there's no electricity. If we look at what's happening in the world today in Israel, Palestine, and in Ukraine, and in other areas of conflict and battle, there are huge parts of the population that have no electricity. Here in California, when we have earthquakes, which I've lived through more than my share, or there are fires or whatever, people lose their electricity. They can't power up their devices. They can't use their devices. They don't have lights, but they do have candles sometimes, and they do have the daytime when they can work. So they can read, they can write, they can draw, they can paint, they can draw pictures, whatever they want. It's a great device. And not every school or every area has really good Wi-Fi. Where I live currently, which is 2 hours north of Los Angeles, it's a city, but within the college district, they have remote campuses. And some of the remote campuses don't have good networks. They don't have a good infrastructure for providing it. So the teachers and the students are always a bit behind. They can't access, or it's difficult to access. Well, until that day comes when everybody can access everything anywhere at any time, that's another movie, we should continue to provide things like libraries and books and comics and pencils and paper, or anything to draw on. I mean, you could draw on a wall with fruit. If it's a house, the parents may not like it, but you can still do it. You can show kids that if they have the imagination, they can do all kinds of ways. And that's where creative thinking comes by. You have an assignment, you're missing a critical component, you find a way to work with it. You find a way to learn with it. You ask questions and you experiment. So it's a great way for people to learn. Excuse me, I have an itchy nose. So that's how I teach. That's what I teach and how I go about it. I will talk more about this later in future blogs. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me on the site. And if you like the idea of what I'm doing and you want to support me, please subscribe to my Patreon page, which you can do by looking down below. So in the meantime, thank you very much. Have a great day and peace.